It's July 1518. A woman steps out of her house into a narrow street in Strasbourg, and she begins to dance. There's no music, no festival, no reason. Her name is Frau Troffea, and she is dancing alone in the middle of the road while her neighbors watch. They wait for her to stop. She doesn't. She dances through the afternoon. She dances until her feet are bruised, then bleeding. She collapses from exhaustion, sleeps a few hours, and then stands up and starts again. And the next day. And the next. By the end of the week, she is not alone. 30 other people are dancing beside her. Within a month, there are as many as 400. This actually happened. It's in the city records, and no one, not then, not now, can fully explain it. Understand what this looked like. This was not a celebration. The people of Strasbourg did not want to dance. Witnesses described them as afraid, in agony, crying out for help even as their bodies kept moving, as if something had taken the controls and would not give them back. They danced for days without rest. And according to the chronicles that survive, some of them began to die. Heart attacks, strokes, sheer exhaustion. One account claims that at the peak, 15 people were dropping dead every day. Now, historians are careful here, and so should we be. The city archives never recorded a clean number of the dead. The death tolls come from later accounts. So we don't know exactly how many bodies this left behind. What we do know is that it went on long enough and looked deadly enough that everyone who remembered it as a killing. A whole town dancing itself into the ground. And here is where it stops being merely strange and starts being genuinely disturbing, because of what the authorities decided to do about it. The leaders of Strasbourg called in physicians, and the physicians looked at the dancers and concluded that this was a natural illness, an overheating of the blood, and that there was only one cure. They had to dance it out. So the city did not try to stop them. The city helped them. They cleared out 2 guild halls. They opened a grain market. They built a wooden stage. And they hired musicians, actual paid musicians, to play, so the afflicted could dance harder and get the sickness out of their systems. There is an entry still sitting in the council minutes from that summer. A payment, 2 florins, for the musicians who played for the dancers. You can guess what happened. Pouring music onto a dancing plague was like pouring water onto an oil fire. More people caught it. The thing spread. The cure was the accelerant. So what was it? What actually made hundreds of people dance until they died? The first answer your modern mind reaches for is a chemical one. Something in the water. Something in the bread. And for a long time, that was the leading theory. A fungus called ergot. Ergot grows on damp rye. Eat bread made from infected grain, and you can suffer convulsions, twitching, hallucinations. It contains compounds related to LSD. On paper, it's tidy. Poison in the food supply, mass intoxication, case closed. It lets you file the whole event under bad luck and worse hygiene. But it doesn't hold. Ergot poisoning chokes off the blood flow to your arms and legs. It can turn your limbs gangrenous and black. People suffering from it can barely walk. They certainly can't dance for days on end. And a hallucinogen doesn't make hundreds of separate people perform the same specific action. Dancing, in coordination, in public, for weeks. Poison can make you sick. It can't choreograph you. Which means the answer isn't in their food. It's somewhere much harder to look. It's in their heads, and not in the way you're thinking. The historian who has spent the most time inside this event, a man named John Waller, argues that the dancing plague was something we still don't like to admit is possible. A disease made entirely of belief. Here's the setup. In 1518, Strasbourg was not a happy place. Years of failed harvest had brought famine. Smallpox was circulating. A terrifying new disease, syphilis, had just arrived. People were starving, sick, and frightened, and they had been for a long time. Their minds were stretched to the breaking point, and in that region, there was a story. Saint Vitus, a saint who, people believed, could punish sinners by forcing them to dance, uncontrollably, sometimes to death. There were shrines to him nearby. Everyone knew the legend. It was in the cultural water. If you were cursed, this is what it would look like. Now put those two things together. A population pushed past its psychological limit, and a ready-made script for exactly how a breakdown was supposed to appear. When Frau Troffea's mind finally gave out under all that pressure, it didn't break randomly. It broke along the lines her culture had already drawn for it. She danced because dancing was the shape her society had carved out for suffering. And then the others watched her, under the same starvation, the same fear, carrying the same story about the same saint. And one by one, their minds followed hers into the exact same trance. Not because anything touched their bodies, because something moved through their beliefs. This has a name now: mass psychogenic illness. Real physical symptoms with no physical cause, spreading person to person through nothing but the mind. The people of Strasbourg weren't poisoned. They weren't weak. They were doing what human beings do when the pressure is unbearable and everyone around them agrees on what the breakdown is supposed to look like. The belief was the disease, and the belief was contagious. Now here's the part that should bother you. It's very easy to watch this from 500 years away and feel safe. To see superstitious peasants dancing to a saint you don't believe in and think, that was them. We know about fungus and neurons now. We're not like that. But mass psychogenic illness never went away. It was never a medieval thing. It happens in modern factories, where workers fall ill in waves from a toxin that inspectors then never find. It happens in schools, where students develop identical symptoms with no identical cause. It happened, arguably, in the last few years, spreading not through a room, but through screens, as clusters of people develop the same involuntary tics after watching the same videos. The mechanism is not extinct. It's in you. The same wiring that danced in Strasbourg is sitting inside your skull right now. All it needs is enough stress and a shared story about how that stress is supposed to come out. And that's the thought that's hard to shake. Because the delusion like this has one defining feature. You cannot feel it from the inside. Not one of those 400 people believed they were caught up in a mass hysteria. Every single one of them experienced it as real, as happening to them, as simply the truth of their own body. The delusion doesn't announce itself. It feels exactly like reality. That's what makes it a delusion. So the honest question isn't how they could have been so blind. It's quieter and worse. What are we all doing right now? Together, in unison, completely certain it's normal, that someone 500 years from now will read about and wonder how an entire generation couldn't see it. You won't be able to answer that. Neither could they. That's the whole point.